The morning my son loaded his wife's matching luggage into the back of his pickup and set my duffel bag on the concrete steps of my own porch. 12 of my neighbors were watching. I know because I counted them afterward. 12 people who had lived within 4 houses of me for the better part of 2 decades. 12 people who had eaten food I grilled, borrowed my extension ladder without asking and returned it without a word, waved at me from across the street on quiet Sunday mornings when neither of us felt like talking but wanted the other person to know we saw them. 12 people who in that moment found something else to look at. My name is George Ballard. I am 66 years old. I am a retired master electrician, a widower of 4 years, and until 8:15 on the morning of the Saturday before Thanksgiving, I believed I was going on a family trip. Welcome to Father's Revenge Stories. Before we go further, drop a comment and tell me what city and state you're watching from. I love knowing who's out there with me. And please keep in mind that this story includes some dramatized elements added for entertainment purposes. The names and some details have been changed, but the heart of what I'm telling you is real and the message matters. Now let's get into it. The trip had been my son's idea, a long weekend at a rental cabin in the Smoky Mountains, 5 days over Thanksgiving, the whole family together. When he mentioned it back in September, I had no reason to think I wasn't included. My wife Frances and I had taken him to those same mountains when he was 7 years old, and he'd spent the entire drive asking when we'd get there. I still have the photo from that trip on the mantel in my living room, the 3 of us in front of a waterfall. Frances laughing at something I'd said. My son with his arms crossed because he'd wanted to go to the beach instead and was still registering his complaint through nonverbal means. Frances has been gone 4 years now, pancreatic cancer. From diagnosis to the end was 11 weeks. I have not yet figured out how to explain to another person what 11 weeks feels like when it contains the last conversation and the last dinner and the last ordinary Tuesday morning of a 38-year marriage. I do not try to explain it anymore. Some things are not meant to be translated. I came downstairs that Saturday morning at 8 with my bag already packed. Green canvas duffel, the one I'd used since my contracting days, still with the company patch sewn on the side because Frances had put it there and I had never taken it off. I had folded everything carefully the night before. 2 flannel shirts, a pair of jeans, my blood pressure medication, the small framed photo I take whenever I go somewhere overnight. Frances at the kitchen table, morning coffee. She didn't know I was taking the picture. The driveway was full of activity when I stepped outside. My son's black pickup was loaded and running. Behind it, a silver SUV I recognized as belonging to my daughter-in-law Kendall's parents, Ross and Linda, who had apparently driven in from Knoxville the previous evening while I was in bed. They were already settled in the silver vehicle, Ross in the passenger seat with his arm propped against the door, Linda in back with a blanket across her lap. Kendall was standing at the tailgate of the pickup, adjusting something in the cargo bed. She looked up when I came out, and something moved across her face in the half-second before she arranged it back into pleasantness. It moved fast, that expression. But I was 66 years old, and I had spent 40 years reading job sites, reading contractors, reading the faces of men who were about to tell me one thing while thinking something else. I saw it. I set my bag down near the rear of the pickup and called my son's name. I thought we were heading out by 8:30. He turned around. He was wearing a fleece I hadn't seen before, dark green, expensive looking. He looked at my bag. He looked at me. Then he exhaled through his nose, a small sound, barely audible, the specific exhale of a man who had been hoping not to have this conversation and has run out of ways to avoid it. He kept his voice low, which told me Kendall's parents were meant to hear a different version of this than the one I was about to get. "We talked about this," he said. "Remember?" He gestured vaguely at the vehicle. "The cabin's got 3 bedrooms. It's tight." We had not talked about this. I would have remembered. I told him so, calmly. I told him we had not discussed any of this, and that I had packed and been ready since 7:45 and would like someone to explain what was happening. That was when Kendall spoke from behind me. She had come around the side of the pickup, quiet-footed, and she said my name with the particular warmth she used when she needed someone to accept something without examining it too closely. She touched my arm, briefly. "Her parents are excited about this trip," she said. "We didn't want things to feel crowded. You know how family dynamics can be." She smiled. "You'll have a nice quiet long weekend here. We'll bring you something back." I looked at her hand where it had just been on my arm. I looked at the cargo bed where my bag was not loaded. I looked at my son, who was looking at the ground. The people watching from their driveways and front porches were very still. Harvey Odom next door, who had lived beside me since 2003, and who I considered the closest thing I had to a friend on that street, was standing at his mailbox. He was holding a piece of mail he had clearly already read. He was not reading it now. My son reached down and picked up my bag. For one full second, I thought he was going to put it in the truck. Instead, he carried it 3 steps to the right and set it on the porch step. He set it down the way you set down something you've finished with a certain finality, a certain lack of ceremony. "Have a good Thanksgiving, Dad." He said it while he was already turning back toward the truck. He said it the way you say it to someone you're passing in a grocery store aisle. "We'll call you Thursday." He got in the truck. The engine was already running. Kendall got in the passenger side. The silver SUV with Ross and Linda in it had started to pull forward. I stood in my driveway in the November cold, and I watched 3 vehicles back out and drive away in sequence, smooth and coordinated, like they'd practiced it. The street went quiet. Harvey Odom put his mail under his arm. He looked at me from across the mailbox. His mouth opened, and then it closed, and he went back inside. I stood there for another minute. The duffel bag sat on the porch step where my son had placed it. The concrete driveway I had poured myself in 1991, slab by slab over 3 weekends while Francis brought me iced tea and told me I was doing it wrong, which I was, caught the thin November light and threw no shadow back. Too overcast for shadows. I picked up my bag. I walked inside. I closed the door behind me. I went to the kitchen and poured the coffee that had been waiting in the pot since 7:30, and I sat at the table where I had eaten breakfast alone for 4 years. But this was a different kind of alone. I sat with my coffee, and I thought about what I had heard the night before, coming down the hallway in the dark at 2 in the morning, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. The night before, I had gone to bed at 10. This was my habit. Francis used to read until midnight, mysteries mostly, the kind with a map of a fictional English village printed in the front. She would finish one and tell me the whole plot the next morning over eggs, and I pretended every time that I hadn't been lying awake for an hour listening to her turn pages. When she passed, I kept the habit. 10 o'clock, lights out. It was the last ordinary thing I had left of a life that had otherwise been turned completely over. I woke at 2 because my knee ached. The November cold had worked its way into the house by then, and the old injury from a job site, fall in 2004, had decided to register a formal complaint. I put on my robe and went to the kitchen for the ibuprofen I kept in the cabinet above the sink. The light was on under the door of the guest room, where my son and my daughter-in-law were staying. I was not looking for information. I was looking for ibuprofen. But as I passed the hallway, Kendall's voice came through the gap at the bottom of the door, low, precise, the voice of a woman who had been waiting to say something for a while and had finally calculated the right moment to say it. She was talking about my house. Not in general terms. Specifically, the square footage, the lot size, the corner location, the fact that Nashville area properties in this zip code had appreciated nearly 80% in the last 7 years. She said her father had a contact at a development firm that had been quietly acquiring residential lots in the area, converting them to commercial mixed use. She said the timing was better than it had ever been. I stood very still in the hallway in my robe. My son said something I couldn't fully hear. His voice was quieter than hers, and there was a note in it I recognized, the note of a man building himself toward something he already knew he was going to do, but needed to talk himself into out loud. Kendall said, "The longer we wait, the more complicated it gets. Your dad isn't getting younger, and honestly, the memory stuff is only going to get worse." I pressed my hand flat against the wall. Memory stuff. There was no memory stuff. My physician had told me 6 months ago at my annual physical that I was, in her words, embarrassingly healthy for a 66-year-old. I drove myself there. I filled out my own paperwork. I remembered every medication I was on and when I'd started each one. There was no memory stuff. But someone had apparently decided there was going to be. My son said, "You're right." 2 words. Not hesitantly, not with any visible struggle. 2 words delivered in the quiet voice of a man, confirming something he had already decided, the way you confirm a dinner reservation or agree on a meeting time. I turned around and walked back to my bedroom. I closed the door. I did not sleep. I lay on my side of the bed, and I listened to the house settle around me the way it does in the cold, the joists contracting, the pipes ticking, the particular sounds of a structure built in 1989 that has been well maintained and intends to continue standing for a long time. At some point before dawn, I got up and sat in the chair by the window and looked out at the driveway. My son's truck was already parked there, waiting. The street was dark and still. I sat in that chair and I thought about Frances. About the year she got sick, how my son had driven down from Knoxville every weekend for 11 weeks without being asked, how he had sat with her and held her hand and talked to her about things that made her laugh even when laughing hurt. I had believed at the time that I was watching my son in the fullness of who he was. I thought, this is who he is. This is the man we raised. I had been wrong, or perhaps I had been right at the time and something had changed since. I did not know which was worse. By the time it was light enough to see the yard, I had made a decision. After the last car turned the corner that Saturday morning, I went inside and went directly to my study. I kept the filing cabinet locked. Inside the top drawer was a folder I hadn't opened in 2 years. My estate planning documents, drawn up 6 months after Francis died by an attorney in Green Hills. I pulled out the folder and read through it slowly. The will left my house to my son in its entirety, along with the remainder of my estate after some charitable contributions I had specified. I had written it while the grief was still so immediate I could barely read the pages. I had written it because he was my son, and because being his father was the most durable fact I knew about myself. I put the folder on my desk. I looked at it for a while. Then I picked up the phone and called my attorney's office. She didn't work Saturdays, but I left a message asking her to call me Monday as early as convenient. I told her I needed to revise some documents and possibly discuss a power of attorney situation. I told her it was not an emergency, but that I would appreciate moving quickly. Then I opened my laptop and logged into my online banking account. My son had been an authorized user on my primary checking account for 3 years. He had told me it was for convenience, in case there was ever an emergency and he needed to help me quickly or cover something on my behalf. He had a debit card linked to the account. I scrolled through the transaction history for the past 6 months. I had not looked at this account carefully in a long time. I had set up automatic deposits and automatic bill pay, and had let it run the way you let something run when you trust the system and the people involved. The transactions ran down the screen and I read every one. There were charges I did not recognize, not one or two, a pattern of them. A hotel in Charleston, South Carolina in September, 3 nights at $560 a night. Dinner charges at restaurants in Nashville that I had never been to and had never discussed going to. Tickets to a Tennessee Titans game in October. A car service charge in November. A wine club membership I had never enrolled in that had been billing $18 a month for 14 months. I added it up twice. $14,300 and some dollars over 6 months, spent on an account that was supposed to be an emergency resource. I thought about the word emergency. I thought about what it had meant to me when my son used it to ask for access to the account. I thought about whether a Titans game and a wine club membership constituted an emergency, and concluded they did not. I called the bank. The woman I spoke to was patient and efficient. She walked me through the process of removing an authorized user, which would take effect within 24 hours. She confirmed the debit card linked to my son's name would be deactivated. She asked if I wanted to be connected to the fraud department regarding any of the charges. I said I would hold off on that for the moment. I was not finished gathering information. I ended the call and sat with the phone in my hand. Then I thought about what Kendall had said the night before. The memory stuff is only going to get worse. I thought about the particular precision of that phrase, not just rude, not just dismissive, but specific, strategically specific, the kind of language someone uses when they are building toward a legal argument. I called my physician's office and asked them to put a note in my file that I did not authorize any communications about my health status to anyone other than myself. The receptionist, who knew me well enough to call me by my first name, told me she'd note it, and also suggested I confirm my authorized contacts were up to date in their system. I asked her to read me what they had. She read me my son's name, listed as emergency contact, and below it, added 6 months ago, which I had not been told about, the name and phone number of someone I did not immediately recognize, a man named Ross Hartley, Kendall's father. I sat with that information for a moment. Ross Hartley, a man I had spoken to perhaps 20 times in 8 years, had been added to my medical file as a secondary emergency contact 6 months ago. I had not authorized this. I asked the receptionist to remove it. I gave her my sister-in-law's name and number instead. She made the change immediately and did not ask me to explain myself, for which I was grateful. I hung up. I sat in my study, and I looked at the window and the late morning light coming through it, and I thought about what kind of person plans 6 months in advance for a conversation that requires your father-in-law to be positioned as your emergency medical contact. Then I called Chuck Reeves. Chuck had sold Francis and me this house in 1989. He had been in residential real estate for 30-some years, knew the Brentwood area better than anyone I trusted, and still sent me a card every Christmas with a handwritten note inside. He answered on the second ring, and when I told him I was thinking about selling, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "George, I've been watching your street for 2 years. Do you know what a corner lot with your square footage is zoning for now?" I did not know. He told me. I sat down slowly. The number he quoted was not the number I had been carrying in my head when I thought about the house abstractly. It was approximately twice that number. The rezoning, commercial mixed use, approved by the county planning board 8 months ago, had done something to property values in my corridor that I had not been paying attention to because I had not been planning to sell. Call them, I said. Whatever development contacts you have. I want a private sale, quick and clean. Done, he said. I'll have someone out to look by Monday. I thanked him and hung up. Then I went to my utility drawer in the kitchen and found the card for a locksmith I had kept since a neighbor's break-in 2 summers ago. I called and scheduled a rekey for Monday afternoon. Every exterior lock on the property. 2 keys, both for me. That night I made a turkey sandwich and ate it at the kitchen table, and it was the most peaceful meal I had eaten in longer than I could easily say. Monday my attorney called back before 9. I explained the situation, the will, the power of attorney I had granted my son 2 years prior, the account access, the medical file. She was quiet in the way good attorneys are quiet, not alarmed, not sympathetic in an unprofessional way, just thinking through the practical implications in real time. By Wednesday, she had drafted a revocation of the power of attorney and a codicil to the will that redirected the bulk of my estate to a foundation I intended to set up in Francis's name, a scholarship fund for students in the trades programs at the technical college where I had once taught an evening course. I executed both documents on Thursday morning with her notary present. The locksmith came Monday as scheduled. He rekeyed every door, the side gate, the garage. He handed me 2 keys on a plain ring, and I tipped him $40 and watched him drive away, and then stood on my porch for a moment and felt the particular lightness of a man who has put something very heavy down and has not yet fully registered that his arms are free. My son called 4 times between Saturday and Wednesday. I watched his name on the screen each time and let it go to voicemail. His messages were brief and escalating, first checking in, then saying signal at the cabin was bad, then asking me to make sure the garage door was working before they got back. The 4th message said they were cutting the trip short, coming home Wednesday instead of Friday, and that he was planning to bring Kendall's parents' back for a post-Thanksgiving dinner at the house. I listened to that last message twice. Then I went and signed the estate documents and came home and made myself a proper dinner for the first time in a week. I heard the trucks coming down the street before I saw them. 3 vehicles, the same convoy that had left 4 days ago, turning onto my street with the unhurried confidence of people returning to a place they believe is waiting for them. I was standing at the kitchen window when they pulled up to the gate. My son got out of the pickup first. He was wearing the same dark green fleece from Saturday, slightly wrinkled now, the collar bent on one side. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his key ring, house key, apartment key, office badge, all together. He'd carried them in that pocket for years, never having to think about whether he was welcome somewhere, because he never had been made to think about it. He put the key in the gate lock, he turned it. Nothing happened. He tried again, and I watched him look at the key, the way people look at something that has abruptly stopped behaving according to the rules they understand. Then he tried the keypad on the post, the 4-digit code he had used since I installed it 2 summers ago. The panel beeped once. The light stayed red. Kendall stepped out of the passenger side. She walked to the gate with her arms crossed and looked at the keypad, then at my son, then at the house. Her parents climbed out of the silver SUV behind them. Ross straightened his jacket. Linda stood beside him with the expression of a woman, recalibrating an expectation. My son called my phone. I watched it buzz on the kitchen table. I let it ring through. He called again immediately. I picked it up on the 3rd ring. I walked through the house and out the front door while we were still on the call. I came down the porch steps and across the lawn at my own pace. There was no urgency. Everything was happening exactly as I had expected it to happen. I stopped on my side of the gate. My son looked at me through the iron bars. There was something in his face I had not seen there before, or perhaps had not allowed myself to see. The particular look of a man whose model of a situation has just encountered something that doesn't fit, and who hasn't yet decided what to do with it. "What's going on?" he said. I didn't answer right away. I looked past him at Ross and Linda standing near the silver SUV. Ross had his arms loose at his sides, his weight shifted slightly back, a man trying to decide whether to step forward or stay where he was. From the street behind them, a white truck turned onto the block. 2 men got out and lifted a stake sign from the truck bed. They carried it across the strip of grass between the sidewalk and my fence and drove the mounting posts into the ground directly in front of the gate. "For sale, Chuck's brokerage logo in red and white." Ross read the sign. He took 1 step forward, then stopped. His expression did not collapse. He was not that kind of man. But it changed in a way I had not seen before. The calculation that had always been running somewhere behind his pleasantness went briefly visible. Linda made a small sound. She looked at Kendall. My son looked at the sign and then at me. His face had gone through several things very quickly and had settled on something with no clean name, the expression of a man watching something vast reveal itself at the exact moment it becomes permanently out of reach. I kept my voice level, even not cold. There is a difference, and it matters. On Saturday morning, I said, "You told me I would be more comfortable at home. You put my bag on the porch step in front of 12 of our neighbors, and you left. I've had 4 days to think about that." I looked at him directly. I've also had 4 days to look at my bank statements, 4 days to talk to my attorney and my physician, 4 days to find out that someone added your father-in-law's name to my emergency contact file at my doctor's office 6 months ago without telling me, and 4 days to think about what I heard through the guest room door the night before you left. He went very still. "The memory stuff," I said. "That's what she called it." His jaw worked. He looked at Kendall. She was not looking at him. She was looking at a point somewhere past my left shoulder, with the concentrated stillness of a woman who has decided that the only available strategy is to wait for the next moment to arrive. He turned back to me. His voice had changed. The composure was gone, and what was left was rougher and younger. "I didn't know about the emergency contact," he said. "Maybe not, but you were in the room when the rest of it was said, and you told her she was right." His shoulders dropped. Harvey Odom came out of his front door then. He walked across his yard to the fence line between our properties and stopped there, not coming onto my lawn, but planting himself where anyone on the street could see and hear him plainly. "I've lived next to this man for 20 years, Harvey said. He was not raising his voice. He didn't need to. I watched him build this place up. I watched him take care of his wife while she was sick. I watched him keep this yard running alone after she died." He paused. "I also watched him stand in that driveway last Saturday while your cars drove away. 12 of us watched it. Nobody said a word." He let that sit. "I'm saying something now." He stayed where he was. He crossed his arms. He did not move and he did not look away. Ross Hartley picked up his jacket from the hood of the silver SUV. He put it on with the deliberate efficiency of a man who has assessed a situation and identified the correct exit. He looked at Linda. She was already reaching for her purse. "We'll get a hotel," Ross said to his daughter, not to my son. The distinction was precise and without ambiguity. "Call us when you've got things sorted." Kendall's face went white. "Dad." He was already walking around to the driver's side. Linda followed without another word. Neither of them looked at the for sale sign as they passed it. The silver SUV backed out and drove away down the street. Kendall watched it until it turned the corner. Then she turned to my son, and the pleasantness she had been carrying for the entire duration of our acquaintance was simply gone. What was underneath was hard and direct, and without decoration. "You told me this was handled," she said. "You told me it was only a matter of time." My son looked at her. "Don't. You said your father was." She stopped herself, started again with something sharper. "You told me we had a plan." "The plan," he said, his voice dropping into something I had not heard from him before, not quite anger, but the voice of a man at the very far edge of something he can no longer hold together, "was your idea, your parents' idea. I went along with it because I stopped thinking about who my father actually was and started thinking about what he had, and that's on me. Not just on you, on me." Kendall looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked to her vehicle and got in. She sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine for long enough that I thought she might get back out. Then the engine started and she drove away in the opposite direction from her parents. My son lowered his hands from his face. He looked at the space where her car had been. Then he looked at the gate. He looked at me. He walked slowly to the gate and stopped on the other side of the bars. His eyes were red at the edges, and his jaw was working, and he was trying to find something to say and not finding it. After a moment, he stopped trying. He just stood there, 37 years old, no car except the pickup behind him, the beginning of understanding, not the full weight of it yet, but the beginning of what he had allowed himself to become. He went down slowly onto one knee on the concrete in front of the gate, not a fall, a descent. The deliberate lowering of a man who has run out of the energy required to remain standing in a pretense. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I reached into my pocket for the key. I unlocked the gate from my side and pushed it outward, away from the house, and stepped through and pulled it closed behind me. For the first time since last Saturday, I was standing on the same side of something as my son. He stood, his movements were slow, he was not quite steady. He said only one word, my name for him to call me, everything else compressed into it. "Let me go first," I said. He closed his mouth. I built this house 35 years ago. I built it with your mother and I raised you in it, and I poured that driveway myself and fixed the roof twice and stayed in it for 4 years after she died because leaving felt like finishing something I wasn't ready to finish. That house is mine. It has always been mine. And whatever I do with it, sell it, keep it, give it to a stranger, that is my decision and mine alone. He did not speak. Being your father does not mean being an asset you manage. It does not mean being a problem you solve before it becomes inconvenient. It does not mean being a man whose memory you start questioning in private while he's in the next room without showing a single real sign of anything worth questioning. His eyes went full, he did not wipe them. I know, he said, his voice was barely there. Do you? I think I forgot. He stopped, started again. I think somewhere in the last few years I stopped seeing you and started seeing the house and the accounts and what comes eventually. He shook his head. I don't have a word for what that is. I know sorry isn't the right size. No, I agreed. It isn't. He looked at me the way he had not looked at me in years. Not the managed look, the real one. The face I recognized from when he was 12 and had broken the basement window with a baseball and couldn't figure out which was worse, what he'd done or having to tell me. What do I do now, he said. His hands came up open, his palms were empty. You figure that out yourself, I said. That's the part I can't hand you. That's the part I should have let you figure out on your own a long time ago. I made it too easy to need me, and too easy to forget what needing me actually meant. Something shifted in his face. Not resolution. That would take longer than this afternoon, longer than this month, possibly longer than this year, but the beginning of something. The first board of a new floor, still loose, not yet trusted with full weight. I'm not selling this to punish you, I said. I'm selling it because it's time, because I have somewhere else to be and something else to do, and because I am not going to spend whatever years I have left maintaining a property that people I trusted were already mentally dividing up while I was in the next room. I looked at him steadily. Is there still something in there worth working with? The kid who used to come find me in the garage on Saturday mornings because he wanted to know how things worked. The one who sat with his mother every weekend for 11 weeks without anyone asking him to. A single tear ran down the left side of his face. He did not wipe it away. That, too, I recognized. I had watched him learn in 3rd grade that crying was something to be ashamed of, and I had never figured out how to tell him the boys who taught him that were wrong. Yeah, he said quietly. I think so. Good, I said. Then there's something to start from. I looked down the street. The November afternoon was cooling fast. The oak trees at the far end of the block stripped nearly bare, the houses going amber in the low light. The kind of afternoon Francis used to say was the year trying to apologize for getting dark so early. Come on, I said. There's a diner on Franklin Road that's been open since 1988. Best open-faced turkey sandwich in Williamson County. Let me buy you dinner before I leave this street for good. He looked at me for a moment. This stranger who was my son. This 37-year-old boy who was my son. Then he fell into step beside me, and we walked away from the gate and the sign and the empty driveway, down the sidewalk toward the end of the block. The silence between us was different from every silence that had come before it that day, not the silence of avoidance or performance or strategy. The older, simpler silence of two people who are walking together and do not yet know exactly where they are going, but have agreed for now to go there in the same direction. The house sold 6 weeks later. I signed the paperwork at Chuck's office on a Tuesday morning in January, and when I walked out into the cold Nashville air with the documents in an envelope in my coat pocket, I did not feel like celebrating. I felt like a man who has set down something very heavy and is standing in the quiet that follows, waiting to understand what comes next. I had bought a small place 18 months earlier, a 2-bedroom condo near Murfreesboro with a porch that faced east and got the morning sun first. Frances had never seen it. I had bought it on a Tuesday afternoon, almost a year after she died, when I understood for the first time that staying in one place forever wasn't the same thing as being faithful to the people who had lived there with you. My son called on the 15th of February, not to ask for anything, to say he had started seeing a counselor, to say he was sorting through what had happened, what he had allowed to happen, what he had told himself that had made the allowing feel acceptable. He said it was slow work. He said he thought it was the right kind of slow. I told him to call me whenever he wanted, not to ask for anything, just to call. On the first warm Sunday in March, I sat on that east-facing porch with my coffee and watched the sun come up over the tree line. The coffee was still hot. I had nowhere to be. No one was waiting for me to fix anything. Frances would have found the right word for the color the sky went in the last minutes before the sun clears the trees. She always had the right word. I looked at that color for a long time, and I thought about her, and about my son, and about the months that had just passed, and about the strange fact that a man can lose almost everything he built and still find himself, at 66 years old, sitting in the morning light with a cup of hot coffee, understanding with complete and uncomplicated clarity that this, exactly this, is enough. Looking back, I understand now that there is a particular kind of love that goes wrong not through cruelty, but through convenience. Through being so available, so willing to absorb and provide, and smooth things over, that the people you love gradually stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as a function. I was that kind of father for too long, and this is what I have learned. The most loving thing you can sometimes do for someone is stop making it easy. Let them see clearly what they have been doing and who they have been doing it to. If you're watching this and you recognize something in this story, if someone in your life has been treating your kindness like a resource and your presence like an inconvenience, I want you to know that it is not selfish to protect yourself. It is not cruel to have standards. And it is never too late to stand up and say, this is who I am, this is what I deserve, and I am done pretending otherwise. Thank you for being here with me. I'm grateful for every one of you who watches Father's Revenge Stories. If this resonated, please leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next one.